Hello everybody and welcome back to another deck profile, and today we'll be going over a brand new deck that was introduced in Dawn of Majesty and will be receiving more support in Burst of Destiny, Despia. Despia is a new fusion based deck that follows the Albaz storyline that I absolutely fell in love with as soon as I saw it. I've just been really wanting to play a fusion deck lately, but I couldn't really figure out what deck to play as none of them really clicked with how I like to play the game until I came across this archetype. I love the artwork on it. I've actually really enjoyed the Albaz lore, so it was just a lot of things that fell into the right place that made me really want to play this deck and get a lot better at it. Now, this deck's main focus isn't so much as shutting your opponent out by spitting a bunch of negates on board and just saying no at every turn, but rather setting yourself up for a grind game so that way you can have all these floaters that can get you more advantage and bodies on board to later facilitate and make your fusion plays down the line. So with that being said, let's jump right into the deck profile. So to start things off, we are running 3 Thaumaturge, 1 Ad Libitum, 3 Eluber, 3 Tragedy, 1 Fleur-de-Lis, 1 Ecclesia, 3 Albion the Shrouded Dragon, 1 Fallen Albaz, and 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. So going into the spells, we are running 3 Despia the Branded Theater, 1 Terraforming, 3 Branded Openings, 2 Branded in Reds, 1 Branded in White, 1 Super Polymerization, 3 Nadir Servant, 3 Allure of Darkness, 1 Gold Sarcophagus, 1 Foolish Burial, and 2 Dogmatica Punishments for the trap cards. Moving on to the extra deck for our 13 fusion monsters, we are running 1 First of the Dark Lords, 1 Proskenium, 1 Starving Venom, 2 Quiritis, 1 Masquerade, 3 Titaniclad, 1 Albion the Branded Dragon, 3 Natis, and for the Link monsters we are running Link Karibo and Al Mirage. So basically, who are your main playmakers for the deck? Dramaturge, Jester, and Tragedy. Tragedy, when sent to the graveyard or banished by a card effect, will basically let you add any Despia monster from your deck to your hand. Albert lets you add any branded spell trap from your deck to your hand, and Dramaturge, when used as a fusion material, special summons it out onto the board, as well as also the fact that when Dramaturge is on the field, while a fusion synchro exceeds or link monsters is summoned on the board, you can then target a face-up monster in the field and negate their effects. Albert also has an effect where if a fusion monster dies, it can special summon itself while also negating an opponent's monster effect, though interestingly, unlike the level 8s, the level 4 and lower Despia monsters all have hard once per turn where you can only use one of their effects, so this doesn't go into its search effect, which is a little odd. Tragedy also has another effect to where you can banish it from your graveyard to then set a branded spell trap to your field. I really don't ever have used this or found it useful, but it might be good for recursiveness. As for Ad Libitum, what makes this card really good is the fact that because it can special summon any of your Despia monsters from the banished zone or graveyard when it's used as a fusion material, can effectively mean that if you have branded in red and then use Ad Libitum, Quiritis, and any of the other Despia monsters, you can go into Proskenium and then special summon the Quiritis immediately right back off of that. I like it at 1. I think any more than that, it's very bricky, and unlike the other Despia monsters, it just doesn't really do anything for you. So it's a good card to have at 1 because you can search it out when you really need it, and it can really help you push for game. Moving on to our other monsters, we are running Fleur-de-Lis and Ecclesia because having a mini Dogmatica engine actually complements the deck very well and helps you really control the game state. Effectively, once you're done with all your fusion shenanigans, you activate Nadir Servant, send Titaniclad, get Ecclesia effect to search Punishment, and then Titaniclad searches Fleur-de-Lis during your end phase, then setting up your negate for the turn. The Shrouded Dragon, you're running 3 of this because it's effectively a mulligan. This lets you just set up your graveyard with Branded or Albaz, put it in the deck, and draw a card, and it can really help you unbrick your hands if you have bricked. And we play one Fallen of Albaz because it's really funny to spam this on the board and then super poly off with one of your opponent's monsters effectively. And 3 Ash Blossom because it's a meta staple, because why not? 3 Despia Theater. The field spell is in fact your in-archetype Polymerization, so having this is really what sets you up for that grind game as well as it does. As long as this card sticks on board, you can fusion summon. This is kind of one of those cards to where it doesn't seem like it's an immediate threat at first, however your opponent then declaring to ignore that card, not really declaring, but leaning towards ignoring this card can actually kind of be what loses in the game, as it may not seem threatening enough, but it's what keeps you alive most of the time. This also lets your fairy monsters from the main deck be floaters, as whenever they die you can then special summon out a level 8 or higher fusion monster from the graveyard. Terraforming obviously to get it out, and then 3 Branded Opening because this is a Return of the Dragon Lords when it's in the graveyard, and then for discarding a card as part of the effect, you can either add to your hand or special summon in defense mode any of your Despia monsters, and then their effects activate. Branded in Red is a very good 2-of. We run this at 2 because it's searchable, same reason why we run Punishment at 2. This card is actually quite phenomenal, and is the main reason why this is a deck concept. You can kind of play this deck without Libertson, and would prefer to not play it without Masquerade, but obviously in the TCG you kind of don't have a choice right now. But this card really makes the deck tick. Effectively, because this is a quick play, what you mainly want to do is set this, and then on the immediate next turn, unless you have a Dramaturge on the field set up to where you want to negate something when you fusion something, what you do is you retrieve one of your Despias that's in your graveyard, preferably Tragedy, and then you fusion off with what you have in your hand or board, which will then banish all of them, to then set up another fusion on the field. Usually if I have a Quiritis and Dramaturge on field, I would then use whatever I get back with the Dramaturge, assuming I have nothing else, to go out into Masquerade. Masquerade may not seem like it's all that impressive, but forcing your opponent to pay 600 just to activate something, mind you, not burn after activation, but they have to pay to activate it, comes in handy, especially in tandem with the grindy nature of the deck, and complements Quiritis very well. Quiritis can seem kind of like a underwhelming boss monster, quote unquote, but what's more prevalent about Quiritis is not necessarily its attack reduction effect, but more so the fact that it floats into a Despia or Fallen of Albaz, just kind of keeping up your grind game mentality. So this effectively sets up effect negation with Dramaturge and just helps you get more searches with Tragedy, or more setup with Ad Libitum, because if you use Ad Libitum, Dramaturge, and then Quiritis, you can get out Proskenium, which can then either banish or special summon to your field, Fusion Synchro Xyz or Link monster in your opponent's graveyard, and then also get your Quiritis back. So just some things to keep in mind. This card is phenomenal, but it does require some setup to activate, so keep that in mind. As for Branded in White, because we are running 3 Albion and 1 Albaz, this is basically a Miracle Fusion, and it's especially nice too when you can spit out a Branded Dragon, then use Branded Dragon's effect to then just spit out yet another fusion, so it's more bodies on board to push for game. And Quiritis admittedly does help with the fact that because you do have a lot of 2,500 bodies, not too much above that outside of your first Dark Lord and Proskenium, this will reduce all the attack values low enough to where your monsters for the most part can just run over them. So having a Miracle Fusion in the deck that's available to you is always very nice. Super Polymerization, not much to say. Dark is a very prevalent type. Light is also a very prevalent type, so to have access to that just makes making your Despia boss monsters or Starving Venom a lot easier. Nadir Servant effectively is the main piece of your Dogmatica engine. It's a free +2 as essentially activated. Search Ecclesia, send Titaniclad, Ecclesia then summons itself once you have your fusions on board. And then you search out your punishment, and then Titaniclad searches out Fleur de Lis in your end phase, which helps you get your negates. Pretty self-explanatory. Allure of Darkness is very good in this deck because you can banish your tragedies off of them, go +2 or go draw 2 off of Allure of Darkness, and then tragedy, if you haven't activated its effect already in that turn, tragedy will then, because it's banished by a card effect, will also get you a search. So it's effectively a +2 alongside tragedy. Gold Sark and Foolish Burial, again, it basically you send your tragedy and then tragedy gets you a search. And as long as you pay attention to it, Gold Sark has the nice added bonus of just having you that tragedy, that second standby phase, assuming the game gets to that point, which by the grindy nature of this deck, it might actually. And then Punishment, because this is a very powerful trap card. Just be a little wary when you use it, as it does lock you out of fusion summoning until the next turn. Not like most other the Dogmatica cards where it's only for the rest of that turn. So just be kind of cautious about that. As for the rest of the monsters, Natiz, Titaniclad are mainly just send fodder. Linkuriboh and Almirage are for effectively when you just kind of brick, but you have your Dogmatica in hand with a tragedy. Doesn't happen often, but just on the off chance it does happen, they are there to do that. Brainy Dragon helps you go for a game, you don't go for that much. Masquerade is extremely good in the grind game, and again, very similar to your theater, can definitely kind of be a little bit easy to overlook at first. Quiritis is your go-to. It's mainly the fact that it's a light monster that makes it so valuable, and the fact that it floats. Starving Venom, super poly target more than anything. Proskenium, a very obnoxious boss monster once it gets on board. And First Dark Lord is that not only is it a big body that also can use 3 of your Dark Fairies that then get you all your floating effects off, but more importantly, it special summons out a fairy from your hand or graveyard as a quick effect, meaning that you can actually get quick effect searches off of your Albert, and that also makes your Branded in Red even more valuable when you do use it. So, with that all being said, let's jump right into a replay just to show kind of what the deck is effectively trying to do, or what a basic idea of the deck is. So effectively here we're just going to get out our branded theater right away, use our Albion to send a branded opening, and now from here it's just pretty typical. So we did get an Albert off the top, which is great, so that way we can search out our branded in red. Here we just go for our first of the Dark Lord, get all of our floating effects off, get our Dramaturge on board, set the branded in red, and set ourselves up. Getting that ad libitum is quite big, as you'll see here in a second. So here, just special summon out the Aluber, get a search, activate Branded Red, get Quiritis on field, search again off of the Tragedy, and now we have ourselves an opportunity here to get a lot of purple on board, and that black clad dragon off the top is actually going to come into play here, as you'll see in a second. So here we go into our Proskenium, use our effect to get it on board, activate our Branded in White to get Masquerade out, and use our second Branded in Red to get out our second Quiritis, and then Dramaturge is going to float into itself. And then here, as you can see, with some setup and waiting to ignite our Branded in Red, we're able to get 5 fusion monsters on board, as well as a Dramaturge. This is a deck that requires some foresight when you're using it and some pre-planning, but effectively, once you set yourself up properly for the long game, you can kind of see where with all these floating effects and like the continuous use of our fusion spell, how this deck can get a little obnoxious and honestly outgrind your opponent with a lot of fusion monsters who have powerful effects when you do get to those later parts of the game. So with that being said, that's going to wrap up the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more, and let me know what you guys think in the comments. Alrighty, you guys have a good rest of your day. Peace.